So you obviously just heard the conversation with both Chris and Katie. You know them, so I'm assuming that you have worked with them. I would like to start, I think, with where we started and asking you a little bit more about what we just talked about, which is we had the trend of greenwashing, then we had the green hashing. How are you working with a lot of your partners to help encourage them to stay the path when things is good the enemy of great the enemy of good? And are you feeling, how are you helping your partners just stay the path when things seem a little scary sometimes?
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, first, thanks to Sally and the Climate Pledge for organizing this event and for the leadership of Amazon in driving 400 plus companies to advance net zero to 2040. This would have been unbelievable a few years ago, and here we are. And I tend to think that maybe this COP is like the Paris COP. And I'm sorry, but the elephant in the room, well, it's not anymore. The flavor of the COP is the fossil fuel phase out. And if we have that on the text, then it's like on the on Paris Agreement. We didn't have a plan, but now everybody has a plan. So the same, everybody will start to have a plan on how to phase down fossil fuels. So this is a critical COP. So in terms of corporate leadership on climate, I like numbers. So we have a couple of initiatives that are quite important. The Science Based Targets Initiative, there's around 6,000 companies that have it. We have the Climate Pledge, 400 companies, and we have the SME Climate Hub, which we created at Women Business, 7,000 SMEs, small, but that are taking action. And that's great. But there are millions of companies out there. And there are many that are not part of these initiatives that are doing things, but still there are millions. And so what we believe at Women Business is that if we mobilize companies to show that this is possible, policymakers will put in place regulation that will impact millions, and that's how progress will happen. Progress that we all want, because those companies are part of your Scope 3 emissions. So this is all together. It's everybody's responsibility. So I tend to, and yesterday I had the honor to speak in front of the UN Secretary General. And I said, it's all good, that integrity matters, but I think what it matters as well is that you point to greenwashers, because saying that business are greenwashing, that is not helping us, because they're great companies doing great things, and then I'm sure that sometimes you are in this awkward position, it's all greenwashing. I'm like, no, it's not greenwashing. I'm investing, I'm risking, right. I'm convincing my board, etc. So that's one part of the story. And that has led, as he has said before, that some companies say, I prefer not to say anything because those that are not doing anything are not on the newspaper, are not being accused. And that's the biggest stupidity of this place, right? Because we need companies to speak. We need transparency, and we need more companies to take action. Now, when we look at performance, so someone said before, we just be quite honest on explaining our performance, because sometimes business say, and I have done this amazing plan, but then what about the rest? How can we put things into the bigger picture? And organizations like mine, and I'm also on the board of SBTI, we have not done our work. Okay, I hope at the board they don't kill me, but we haven't given you all the rules of the game. Because we are making those, as we speak in some areas. And one of them, for example, is we don't have a reporting framework for SBTI, because these are 5-year targets and how our company is going to report. We're going to be working on it, okay, but it's not here. So sometimes I feel for business that you are super committed, but then it's not very clear sometimes. And you just need to make assumptions. And you come often to me and to my peers, and we say, yeah, well, this is, we need to improve. But as I was saying to Daniel on the car, I mean, we have a huge responsibility at the NGO side of giving the rules of the game and do that quick. Because we're talking about millions of investments.
Yeah, and to your point, we started to touch on a little bit in the last question in the last session about data, reporting, transparency, regulation. Obviously, data is a huge piece of how you offer the tools to partners. So what can you say for the role of data and how that can help move sustainability forward?
My first job was a statistician, so what can I say?
You like data.
I love data. I did a PhD afterwards. It was all about data. But come on, I mean, you know that if you measure, you can manage. If you're transparent, you can compare. And there's nothing that you like more as business and as humans is to be the best, right? And you can only do that if you can compare the data. So kudos to CDP, okay, for doing what they're doing, for aligning us also on a voluntary setup. Now we have the different regulations that are coming, and in that sense, for us, it's very important that ISSB sets the global baseline, because US companies want to report similarly in every geography, and you don't have to be, you know, it's complicated, right? And then there's the story about the Scope 3 emissions, right? Yeah. Which is, that's the biggest challenge. And I often say that, and I say this to governments, that it's all good, all the scrutiny on business, but, you know, business are doing the Scope 3 emissions. Countries are not. Countries are only doing Scope 1 and 2 emissions, okay? Right. So it is true that most of your emissions come from Scope 3, so you need to do it, okay? But also, let's also call things by their name. Now, in that sense, I think we need to progress on Scope 3. We launched a campaign, and thanks, we have a partnership with the Climate Pledge. It's called Supplier Cascade. And what we're saying, just start with your tier 1 suppliers. If you're starting, I think there are companies that are on tier 5, tier 6, and please continue. But I think for those companies that say, oh, how am I going to do it? Well, start with tier 1 suppliers and ask them to set a science-based target or whatever target that you want them to do as a mechanism for them to roll on the responsibility down, to cascade the responsibility, because they will need to ask for the tier 1 suppliers and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think reporting, it's everybody's responsibility. The more you ask, as I have heard, your suppliers to report, the better. You know, which is the country, the region in the world that is setting more science-based targets at the moment? It's China. Okay? Because you are asking your Chinese counterparts to do it. And of course, the consultants are very happy and explaining them how to do it, etc. But it's incredible, you know, the impact that that what we are trying to do is having a cross-border. You know, here it's very difficult for 196 countries to agree, but business operates in 196 countries, and they are asking the same everywhere. And kudos to you for doing so, no matter where your supplier are, because this is everyone's responsibility.
So this is the Global Stock Take year. I think it would be interesting for me to hear where you think, I know the Global Stock Take is more for countries, but where do you think corporate-wise, what would you give? What is the Global Stock Take on the company side?
Yeah, well, I tend to be positive, right? So 14,000 is great. But then when you look at the numbers, well, first, we don't know where to look at the numbers, because there is nowhere that you can report progress on your targets. So but we have tried, and we have seen that those companies that have targets are reducing what is needed or more. Mm-hmm. So that's great. Yeah, that's great. But we need many more companies, as I said. Yeah. And so for us, for women business at this COP last year, we saw it very clearly that the topic and the most important thing at this COP is this conversation on fossil fuel phase out. Yeah. Because you know, you are on the trenches trying to deploy solutions, and you will see that it's much harder to work with fossil fuels, because the regulations are set for that, than with clean solutions and new solutions, because regulations are not set or fit for purpose. And so that's why it's important that in these meetings, there is a global agreement of probably going to be phased down of fossil fuel, which is obvious, because if we are in a net zero trajectory, if we have agreed on the Paris Agreement, it is obvious that it needs to go in that direction.
How do we do that? How do we get there? How do companies, what are some steps they can take?
Well, I mean, I didn't come here to pitch our letter, but thank you. So we did write a letter, which is very sensible, when we look, okay, as a company, if you want, you know, what do you need to do in terms of phase out if you are a producer, an investor, and a demand? And we focus on the demand. We say, okay, in the demand, you need to, start to include in your transition plan, how are you going to phase down fossil fuels? And we have 200 companies that have signed. Now, I'm very worried with the US companies, and I know that there are a lot here, because you live in such a strange world these days. And so even me, we had to review the letter like 10 times with the lawyers, which we never do this at Women Business, because maybe we will be subpoenaed because some of our peers have been subpoenaed. And I didn't know what this word meant, and I don't want to know more. And so we don't have US companies signing the letter because we are in an election period. And how are you going to have 10, 20 years plan, and you just need to, during certain parts of the year, not say anything and not speak up? We need the American voices to speak up. You need the regulation in the US to go in that direction if you want to achieve your targets. So please speak up, be courageous, because once you start to have 1, 2, 3, then the rest will come because you will feel comfortable. We almost got the big one, big company, and then the lawyers saw it and say, I'm afraid not. And of course, this is a letter, and says, what is this letter, right? These letters that you NGOs send us, right? Well, I think this letter meant that yesterday I spoke in front of the Secretary General because they wanted us to talk about the fossil fuel phase out. And then we're talking to the Germans and we're talking to other countries because they want to see that business are supporting the change. And I think in this room, business are supporting the change. So whether you sign the letter or not, you still have the chance. I can give you some cards, etc. But please speak up about it, and even say, even if you didn't sign the letter, if you think it makes sense, please, when you talk to policymakers, talk about it, because it's important that they hear it from you, not from me. Well, it's also from me, but.
What advice would you give to the sustainability executives that are in the room from all over? Let's say they're really struggling with like trying to get other executives at their company on board for what the things that they want to do, the issues they want to tackle. What can they do? What advice do you give to your partners about how to get sustainability on the agenda for them?
Yeah, well, I think you have probably 4 pressures, no? One is the regulations, which it's kind of up and down in some countries. The other one is your employees, because they want to be proud of the company they work with. The third one is your clients, and as we know, the pressure is coming upside, the downside of your value chain, and you're putting that pressure. And then there is an opportunity, okay? And when there is change, there is opportunity. And accelerating this transition is a huge business opportunity. So as business, you need to convince your executives, but I'm sure that, when there are these letters or these SBTIs or this scoring, and you show the competitor that is going into that direction, they say, oh, and if you show them that someone else is doing better than you, and that's why you have to invest in certain plans, you say, oh, okay, maybe. So there is, the tricks on how to get them better than me. But I mean, definitely, I don't think there is any business in the world that doesn't think, that we need to tackle climate change. And I suppose some see it as a threat, but I think the people in this room probably see it as an opportunity. That's why you came all the way here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your one? I mean, I think I know what the answer to this question is going to be, but I'm going to end with it anyway as our last question. What is your number one hope that you want to see come out of COP?
As anyone else wants to say it.
We can say it all together. Fossil fuels.
Yes, no. So I think, it would be ideal that the tripling of renewables, doubling energy efficiency, and fossil fuel phase down is included in the text. And ideally, I want people to understand that the fossil fuel phase down, it's a risk management approach, because we need to have an orderly transition. The more we wait, the more radical it will be. The earlier we start those plans, the better. I don't want to see investments in infrastructure that is going to be stranded in 5 years in Africa. Because maybe in the US or Europe we can afford stranded assets, but these countries, developing countries, don't. They have enormous debt. So let's not fool ourselves with the arguments of the just energy transition. Renewables are competitive, they are available, they are affordable, they are everywhere, and that's how countries, developing countries and emerging economies need to leapfrog. So help raise your voice, continue to do the great work that you're doing, report well, and yes, and you know where I am if you need any help, if I can be of any help. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Maria.